What's up, everyone? This is Anthony Blaylock here and Craig Moshkow. We're gonna start a little video podcast, talking about your favorite team, Portland Trail Blazers. Calling this the Rip City Real Talk. Basically, we're gonna go through our opinions, recap games, weekly situations, breaking news, things along those lines. Give you guys some feedback based on what we think. Without sugarcoating it and being too nice to guys and really just telling you again what we feel is real conversations and real things that real fans will understand.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I feel with that, this is the first episode. We obviously have about a week or so and 10 days, 9 days or so to the regular season kicks off. We figured in the first episode we're gonna discuss some of the moves made in the offseason, things we like, don't like, and some pretty simple predictions and things for the regular season and continue to break it down throughout the year.
Let's do it, man.
So, I figured a good place to start. Then we'll just kind of talking about some of the departures and some of the arrivals, kind of break that down. And then from there, just kick off what we're excited for as far as the players that came in and we think their roles will be and things like that. So,
yeah. So first things first, we didn't have a draft pick, right, of substance. We took CJ LB in the second round, but we don't think he's going to be a difference maker in any way. No. As far as like off-season moves, who did we know was going to leave 100%? Who are you banking on leaving?
Whiteside. I think as soon as you got Nurkic back, I think granted, I did not expect Whiteside to take a minimum contract for the Kings and all that, but I expected we weren't going to bring him back just because the price was probably going to be too much for us. So right. That was the probably one of the more productive guys in the roster last year that we ended up letting go.
Yeah, I think Whiteside's a big loss. I don't see a whole lot lost in this roster. I think we focus on the additions and we just focus on the positive, and that's what Blazer fans are good at. So in looking forward to what we're bringing in, I think the first shocker was when you text me and said, holy crap, we got Rocco. So walk me through how you felt. What did we give up? How you feeling on that?
Well, that was probably the biggest thing we needed, obviously. I mean, if you look at all the experts out there, the guys that we expect to be in a year or so, I think 3-and-D was the biggest thing. The defensive wing. We got offense. We got Dame. We got CJ, Nurk. These guys can score. Really, what we were lacking was a defensive wing. When we went to the Western Conference Finals, the biggest thing that probably got us there was guys like Mo and Aminu and the underrated defense that they give us. They don't give you flashy plays, but the defense, the ability to guard positions 4 through 2 on a consistent basis, I mean, that is huge. We did not have that last year. I mean, Carmelo did his best. CJ's too small. And outside of that, we really didn't have another good wing that we could put out there to try to lock guys. Yeah, maybe not lock them down per se, but at least slow them down. And I think that really was it's a big thing lacking on this team from the Western Conference Finals team that we had 2 years ago.
Yeah. I think if Rocco's successful, a lot of fans won't even notice it because he will be locking guys down. And I think that we took as fans Mo and Chief for granted. I mean, when you can't stop a team's best scorer, whether it be a Harden, whether it be, I can't think of all the amazing guards that have beat our asses in the playoffs over and over and over again. And here's the situation as a fan that we have to really wonder about. Was this move a push all in for the playoff? Like, do you think this is like a playoff push to a championship level roster when you see us trade 2 firsts like that?
I think at this point, yes. I mean, you don't go out and get a guy and pay him that kind of money and give up the assets that we did to get him. Granted, it was Ariza, wasn't really an asset, but you kind of expected us to make a move like this, to go out and get a guy and make a push right now. I think the bubble last year really sparked some urgency in Neil. I think that going to the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago and then coming back in and playing as hard as they did, I think you need to go in right now with Dame, a healthy Nurk, and try to build around this team. And I feel like this was a move that was a bold statement to the rest of the league that we're going to come in and contend. I mean, you got to look at our biggest competitors in the West. You got to look at Denver and what they did with Michael Porter coming in strong. And you got LeBron, obviously, in our division. And you continue to have guys like Kawhi and George, these bigger wings, these forward players that continue to score for the teams we didn't have. And if you're going to compete with the best teams in the West, you got to get a guy like that you can put out there to slow some of these other bigger players down. I mean, that's
Mhm.
just plain and simple.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to honestly having just a lockdown guy. I don't think we've had one. Ariza was the closest thing we had, and we didn't even have him in the bubble last year. So, what are we gonna get out of Rocco? Like, is he gonna be able to shut the best defender or the best scorer down? I think the other thing that you got to look at is, and the thing that people don't understand from a non-Blazer fan perspective, CJ and Dame can do a lot offensively to take the pressure off of these guys, where all they have to do is defend. I was just having a conversation with Rain about, okay, so you have Dame and CJ, they score, and we need two guys to defend, basically, because to offset that, we have to have 2+ defenders. And I think this is the first time we've had it since Mo and Chief, and Mo and Chief were really big negatives on the offensive end. Can
Right.
Rocco and DJ be a better version of Mo and Chief offensively because they have more bounce? Is that something
I
you see?
think so. Yeah, I think Chief was kind of one-dimensional in his scoring. I mean, he surprised you with his three-point shooting. I think he was high 30s, low 40s. I'd have to look up actual stats.
Mm-hmm.
But he was pretty good. He was consistent enough to where you weren't mad at him taking an open three. But I think with Rocco, that's going to go up substantially. He's going to get more open looks shooting from three than I think he's gotten when he was, with Minnesota or Houston last year. He's going to get a lot more looks based on our ability to drive with our guards and the post play that we get from Nurk. So I expect him to be mid to high 40s percentage wise from three,
Mm-hmm.
taking probably 3 to 4 attempts at least a game. And I think just with the open looks he's going to get, you're going to see a good percentage out of him. That's already an improvement over what Chief was, and he's bigger and longer than Chief.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's at this point, you got a bigger wingspan. He's a more athletic body, and he's had a lot of success in the league even before he came here. If you look at his years that he was in Philly, so 100%. We haven't really gotten to the DJJ thing yet, but Derek Jones, I don't know what to expect. I think Mo was actually pretty underrated as far as offense goes. I think he was able to do things consistently. He drove pretty well. His offensive rebounds were helpful. There was a lot of clutch moments in the playoff run 2 years ago where if we didn't have Mo out there playing as hard as he did, had been Mo, then we don't get past a team like Denver. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think I agree with you 100%. I think that the defense is something we lacked, and we addressed it with two long, lanky wings.
Mm-hmm.
And we just need to see what they can do. I know what Rocco can do offensively. I'm not quite sure on Derek Jones. He kind of
Yep.
disappeared from Miami in the playoffs because he really couldn't score.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to hope that he can improve there. We're going to rely on him to be that other guy defensively and be on the court.
I think so. The Derek Jones Jr. thing is such a small contract. How could it hurt you, right? If the guy is long and bouncy and he plays well, how can it hurt you?
I mean, we obviously feel good about him enough to have him start. At least so far, we haven't really gotten to our roster depth yet in some of the positions, but the word on the street and what we've seen so far in the preseason is that he's going to be our starting small forward.
Mm-hmm.
Could change when Rodney Hood comes back. They may move him up to put Derek Jones on the bench for defense, but I don't see it. I think that they like him enough to fit that Mo Harkless role that he will end up starting for us. So you figure Stotts has that much confidence in a guy coming in, being brand new to the team and the system, that he's going to be successful right off the bat.
Absolutely. So we trade for Covington. I think that was pre-draft. We drafted. CJ Ellaby's going to be a developmental player, G League guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's
Yeah.
another kind of those taller guards, small forwards in that range. A Rodney Hood type of player that, as far as I know, was relatively successful in college for Washington State. So I think that he'll be fine. He'll never see the court, or he'll see it in very limited garbage time, or if we hopefully don't get to that point where injuries are that big of a concern. Just talking with some of our friends and stuff, I think at this point the depth that we have right now is going to make it hard for a lot of guys to get involved, and he's one of them. He's just not going to be a factor at all. I mean, not at least not for a few years.
Okay, so then free agency starts. We did the trade to acquire Enos. How did you feel? Yeah, how did you feel at that point?
I loved it because here's the thing, we weren't bringing back Whiteside, and we lose the rebounds, we lose the blocks, all the things that he leads the league in, consistently. But again, not knowing that he's going to go out and get a minimum contract, and even with the minimum contract, that is money that we would have had to spend to bring him back. I don't think he cares for being on the bench. His whole demeanor changed when Nurk came back into the bubble. You saw his energy go down a little bit, and with a guy that's consistently known not to have a lot of energy anyway. it's just, yeah, you have to get a backup center at that point. And the fact that they're bringing back in Cantor, who already knows our system, and you know, we keep referring to the Western Conference Finals run that we had. Again, he was a huge part of it. I don't think anybody expected him to do what he did. I think he
Right.
kind of came in to fill a need, and he filled it very well. I mean, he went toe to toe with a guy like Jokic and toe to toe with Steven Adams consistently. And I think a lot of that had to do with just the ability for him to play offense, to give us a good post game and offensive rebounds, those types of things that you need. And he came in and hustled. So he goes to Boston. That sucked last year, right? We had to go out and get Whiteside, mainly because we didn't bring Cantor back, and we felt that the trade, get rid of Myers' money and bring back Whiteside, kind of a wash.
Yeah.
So to get him back, and the kicker is we didn't pay for him. I mean, it came with our trade exception, right? So that is Neil going out and getting a quality backup center at nothing that's going to affect our books. I mean, we had the trade exception. We used the trade exception to bring him in. I think that's why I like that move so much. I mean, it's not necessarily Cantor by himself as oh yeah, great, we got a great Cantor, he's so good. No, it's the fact that we got a good center for a trade exception and basically didn't have to pay him. So that's key when you're trying to work in our salary situation and a contender and trying to build this roster to be a contender.
I'd rather have Enos all day than Whiteside for whatever money I mean, even at veteran minimum, I just feel like Enos is a better fit. He's a better culture fit. I think he'll play great in that second unit. We talk about matchups and all the things that we need out of these Blazers. You know, the first unit, I think Nurk's anchoring on the defense is huge, right? Like, we need this defensive anchor. Enos is a totally different matchup that you can throw out there in the backup unit. So it'll be interesting to see how the second unit plays with Enos. But I just like his fit better. I never liked Whiteside in Portland. I always watched him and his minutes just felt like empty calories. You know, he'd get blocks, he'd get rebounds, but it was never, his heart was never in it to win it for us. I didn't get that from him. It didn't feel like a Blazer to me. Enos always did. He always stepped up, and I love Cantor. I thought it was a great move.
I mean, the fans love him. He loves it here. I mean, from the social media posts that he does, his entire just mannerism is a better fit for the team. The guys in the locker room love him. You know, he's going to come in. He's going to be excited to play on the bench. And again, you know, I think he can generate his own offense, which is going to be huge for us in the second unit. We have a lot of ISO ball players. I mean, when you look at Melo and Gary Trent, who relies on the 3-point shot. So you're going to need a guy that can get the ball down low and take on backup bigs and consistently get you that 10 points a game as a floor. And Whiteside offensively, without somebody to feed him the ball, I just don't know.
He was great with Damon CJ because they were shooters, but we don't want him in that second unit. It's not going to mesh.
Yeah, exactly. So getting Enos in there, a guy who's going to play really well, I feel, with the guys that are going to be around him to be able to get those offensive rebounds, the hustle boards, and like you said, just a culture move for not having to pay anything is huge for us. That's one of my favorite additions, honestly, of the offseason is getting a guy like Cantor to come in essentially for free and lock up a spot that we struggled with last year with, you know, injuries granted, but we struggled with it. So,
and he's a huge rotation piece, right? And the thing that I think we're going to talk about a lot this year is the depth of these Blazers. We can throw essentially two starting lineups out there that our first lineup is obviously our strongest lineup, but the second lineup is going to be a different lineup, more offensive. And I just feel like we're not going to have that big stagger where it's like starters and then this B squad comes in. And if we can have Harry Giles, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, if we can have Cantor, if you have a guy, if Hood comes back and is moderately healthy this year, I don't even want to talk about Melo because I know what's going to happen to you if we start talking about Melo. So we'll talk about him later.
Oh, you know, Melo guy. He had 21 points the other night. Come on. Come on.
Okay, so let's go to Harry Giles. What do you know about Harry Giles and what is he famous for?
I know he's just an athletic freak who's a hustle guy. I know that when we got him, you read the social media feeds, Sacramento hated letting him go. They were super mad at their GM that they didn't give him the option, let him hit free agency. And I just feel like you're going to get a guy that's going to come in and give you energy. This is something we haven't had a chance to discuss yet, but I don't know where he fits on our team specifically. I don't think he's going to play. Not very often, not early.
Sure.
You know, because they're going to obviously commit to Carmelo being the backup 4, and Cantor, as we just discussed, is going to be our backup 5. And then one thing that we haven't really brought up is Zach's injury and what
Mhm.
happens when he comes back, because he's going to put a big wrench in and how the roster works, whether he starts at the 4 and you move Covington back to the 3, and then what happens to Derek Jones, or if he comes in, does he go to the backup 4? Does he push Carmelo to the 3? Either way, whatever that situation is, and we'll discuss that, I don't see Giles getting involved. I think right now he's a kind of an upside guy. He's, we have to go get our Kings player, right? We have to go get our Skull or our Caleb would have been back after. We always gonna have the backup Kings power forward somewhere. So Neil has a pattern, and but I think when you have him in there, if something does happen to Nurk, you never know. He's a big guy coming off leg injury. If something happens to Zach, who's already proven that he's the last couple of years been a little injury prone, at least last year. Carmelo's a little old, and if they start to get into foul trouble, whatever the situation is, now you have a guy that I feel comfortable in over a Moses Brown coming in to play that backup 4 or 5 position. And I think that I saw somebody quoted on one of the social media things, and they said basically like Neil decided that he's never going to have a guy like Moses Brown coming in to play center first again. He is stocking up on bigs.
How much Moses Brown hate?
The apocalypse. So yeah, I mean, I love Giles. I love what he can do. You saw him in this last preseason game take out his revenge on Sacramento, and those are the types of things you're going to get from him: the dunks, the athleticism, the hustle. I don't think he contributes to the team right away, but I mean, I'd have to see the rotational piece. He might early, depending on what happens with Melo and all that. I mean, I don't take that preseason game with any kind of grain of salt because Hood didn't play and Nurk didn't play, so the rotations were a little weird. But
Yeah.
I'd love to see him get some minutes. I just don't think it'll happen early.
It's going to be tough for him to find minutes, but I think that he is one of those guys that Neil likes to take a shot on, that has this elite athleticism and this elite upper echelon ability. Whether or not that ever transpires for us, I don't know. He has these really great stretches of playmaking, and Harry Giles can do some of this crazy, like these crazy passes that Nurk can do. He's a very consistent playmaker. How are we going to give him those opportunities? I don't see it. I agree with you. To me, he's either a third center, which you would use sparingly, or he's going to be a power forward tweener. And to me, that screams trouble for Zach. That to me means that either he's insurance for Zach, or he is, if we want to move Zach this year in a trade or let him go, I don't know. But to me, like, because here's the deal: Zach and Harry Giles were involved in that trade to acquire Zach. Harry Giles was the pick that the Kings used. Yeah. So maybe Neil likes his upside more and says, I'll trade. I don't know. I'm not sure. There's no beat to this, but I just feel like Harry Giles is a shot, and Neil likes to hold lottery tickets.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the lack of depth last year sunk in a little bit. I think at this point, you got to get some guys out there that you can have play. You can't rely on the Winnie and Gabriels to come in and guard Anthony Davis, if injuries happen, right?
Yeah.
So I like it. I think he's a great upside piece. Again, didn't cost us very much, if nothing really. So you come in there, and I agree. I mean, we haven't really got a chance to do much of the predictions, and I think Zach's name will come up a lot down the road, closer to trade deadline time.
Yeah.
I think they're going to give him all the opportunity in the world coming off the bench or potentially starting with limited minutes to prove that he deserves a second contract with us, all of Myers Leonard. Neil likes those guys that can potentially stretch the floor, but we just haven't seen it from Zach, not consistently. His defense has never really developed. He's a hustle guy, but he fouls a lot. He struggles against the bigger guys that post up on him. So I think you go out and get a guy like Giles as insurance, like you said, in case the Zach thing doesn't work out for us this year. If this is kind of his last chance and last straw. But really, more importantly, my opinion is that it's based on injuries. I really just don't think that they want to go through what they did last year. I think you're filling up on cheap athletic bodies, guys that you can take a chance off and get to that point instead of pulling dudes off the G League to try to come in and make moves. So that's where I think his role is. But we'll have to see how the roster kind of rotates out and how the depth chart plays as Stott starts getting the regular season rotations.
Okay, so we have gone through most of the moves at this point. We haven't talked.
Moves this year.
I know. It's kind of crazy to think that we brought in feasibly 2 starters. We re-signed Melo. There's all this crazy stuff going on. We didn't have a lot of departures. So at the end of the free agency, we pretty much thought we were done. We thought we might have one more signing left. Derek Jones Jr. gets signed, and I don't think you even know who Derek Jones Jr. was.
I barely knew him. No, I mean the slam dunk contest. That's Derrick Jones Jr. to me. That's who he was. Because you hear all the stuff that came out of Miami, all the rookies and those guys that they had, those young players, and you just kept hearing those names. And so I'll be honest with you, I really didn't know much about the kid. And then as we started looking at film and listening to people talk about him and seeing the ridiculous amount of athleticism as he has, great. I thought we just got like a slam dunk guy, a worse version of a slightly longer Zach LaVine. Like, cool, he can dunk. That's great. He'll be fun to watch twice a week. Like, great. But the more I look at him, his defense. Again, he's lanky. He's tall. He's going to be able to get arms up on people. And we touched on this a little bit with Rocco, but I don't think we touched on the perimeter defense of the Blazers and how bad it was last year and how many threes we gave up. Dame and CJ getting stuck on screens and not being able to get to their guys, and none of our bigs being able to get out there and do any kind of defense. So I think that he adds that other element of just having a tall guy to get a hand up on 3-point shooters, and then at the other side of the floor, just cutting lanes, be able to move and fit a role in the offense just out of pure athleticism that, again, we didn't really have last year. So I'm more and more excited about him the more I kind of watch him and I learn about him and I read about him, and getting to see him in the preseason game is great. He's hitting threes. I got some of the preseason game on in the background. I watched him hit a three, and that is not something I knew about him. And that, we talked about comparing him to Mo, and I think that moves him up a little closer to that Mo Harkless role, again, that we were successful with. So he's going to get open looks just like Covington is, and I like him. I like him a lot.
I do too. And I think that he and Rocco give you the defensive versatility that we haven't seen in a long time. So they both have 7 feet or longer wingspans. So you think that Derrick Jones Jr. gets matched on a power forward, he'll be fine. He'll be great guarding point guards and guards. He's going to help shut down so many of those players. And not only is he long, but he's athletic side to side. So I think you won't see these blow-bys that you've seen. I mean, a lot of our guards are concrete-footed, so a lot of the time they just get blown right by.
Yeah.
And then you're hoping that Nurk can just like swat at the rim. And as much as you love Nurk in that role, it's just not possible. And we've seen that it's not a feasible system for us. So we need these long defenders, and we need people that can go side to side and keep people from driving on us too. That's probably been one of the most frustrating things about the Blazers is people like facilitator guards drive
easy
on
buckets.
crazy
Easy buckets. Too many easy buckets, whether it be the drives or whether it be wide open threes and guys not being able to get out and play that kind of defense. It has to stop, because we were 3rd in the league in offense last year. Like that, we didn't really have it. I mean, outside of Dame and CJ, I mean, even with Nurk, I know the bubble is one thing, but we still put up a lot of numbers on offense. We were great. We were scoring. We were hitting threes. I mean, everything was rolling, but you're in too many games where the other team is scoring against us. I think if I remember right, we were 27th in total defense. Like you can't be just an offensive juggernaut and not play defense, because eventually guys have an off night or they get tired, like Dame trying to carry us on his back. So I think having this extra defense is going to allow them to not have to play so hard on the defensive end and focus even more attention on offense. And that's scary if you're a Portland fan. Like that's going to be really good for us, especially if he can consistently hit a 3-point shot. I don't need much out of him, 35% or higher. Sure, hit a little over 1/3 of the threes you take. You're going to make people respect you, and that's going to take away doubles from guys like CJ and Dame.
Yep. And I think with Derrick Jones Jr. and with Rocco this year, fans are going to have to be patient, and you got to watch who they're guarding. I think we have this tendency to think that guys either aren't good defensively or whatever. You'll watch Covington, and he'll guard Harden for half the game. So if he gives up points, you got to think he's giving them up to Harden. Everyone gives up points to Harden. So I think fans are going to have to be patient. I don't think you're going to see these guys score 20 points very often. I don't think you're going to see – you're not going to see – no, you're not. I mean, Covington will get you double-digit rebounds sometimes, but he's not going to be like a massive stat patter. So watch these guys, and then watch the wins. I think you're going to see a bigger win total for us this year, and I think you're going to see us compete with the teams like the Lakers and the Clippers that are bigger than
closing games out, having that defense at the end of games, being able to finish strong, have 3-point shooting out there. I mean, as much of a Melo signing fan I am, hitting those clutch threes. Hey, Bubble Melo was a legitimate threat from three. How many of those threes did you see him hit in the bubble to win us games in the end?
Okay,
Missed your
a lot.
dagger.
Okay.
Walking bucket, but not starting. Listen, love Melo on this team, not starting. It was not feasible.
Right.
And you basically fixed that with what we got. So yeah, I'm excited for that. The additions, I mean, Jones, Cantor, Covington, so far, awesome moves. Re-signing guys that know the system. We haven't even talked really about practically an addition in Rodney Hood because we didn't really get to have him in the bubble.
I feel
what
like
he might be able to do.
I feel like Zach Collins and Rodney Hood could be as big of additions as anybody this year because we forget about them at times because they're hurt for so long.
Yeah. So exactly. I mean, that's just, again, that's going to be one of those things that we're getting guys back from injuries. And I worry, I was joking earlier with some people, but I worry that we have too much depth. Like that's a weird problem to have. But like I mentioned, when Zach comes back, like what is his role going to be? And that kind of transitions us from the the departures and the arrivals, because we don't need to talk about Mario Hazonia. Bye. So
Oh no, I like that signing.
I'm even going to spend time talking about
Oh,
that.
it hurts still.
We're done with the departure piece of this.
Bye Mario.
So you're going to get to a point now where, as far as the roles of these guys, and we've kind of talked about the additions and their roles, but it's also some of the guys coming back. I mean, it's Carmelo, who is going to get 15, 20 attempts a game in the bench. He's going to get a lot of ISO ball and backups, and I love that role for him. But at the same time, when Zach comes back, it gets weird. It gets really weird because now you have Nurk and Covington at the 4. Well, let's just go through two scenarios. I'm going to give you two scenarios. I'm going to let you tell me which scenario you think is better based on the top 10 guys. So right now, I'm going to say Zach comes back. So then you're going to have Nurk. And let's say you have Zach at your 4. All right. Let's say he retakes up the starting 4 position so that you can slide Covington to the 3. And then you let Derrick Jones come off the bench. We'll get to that in a moment. So then obviously you have CJ and Dame. So there you go. So now let's take a look at what this does to our bench, right? So if you do that starting 5, now you got Cantor, he's not going to not be the 5. He's going to be our backup center, plain and simple.
Yep.
Again, don't think Giles comes in, but let's say Carmelo, with this lineup, you say Carmelo stays at the 4.
Yep.
All right. Then you have Derrick Jones to fit in here, right? He was just your starting 3. You're not going to cut him out completely. He's too, in my opinion, a little too big to play the guard position. So he's got to go to 3. He's got to be your starting small forward. And now you have 2 shooting guards. You have Rodney Hood and Gary Trent to deal with here. And it almost makes me wonder, like, do you put Hood at a point forward position? Is he a good ball handler? Because you can't have Gary Trent bringing that ball up the court. I mean, he's not going to be able to do it. He's a 3-and-D, a great 3-and-D guard. I think he's going to really blossom this year. We're going to see that, but he can't bring the ball up. So Rodney Hood's going to have to fill in somewhere. You didn't just sign him to a big contract to let him wither away. So now you got to think, if he plays point guard, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony's done. I mean, again, unless injuries and fouls and those types of things come into play, you invested a first-round pick in a guy that you really want to be your backup point guard. He's probably the only true backup point guard. Absolutely. Again, I'm not really using that term with him because I don't feel he is a point guard, but he gets cut out. So it gets weird. The amount of depth that we have, if you start thinking about that, is crazy. And then on the flip side of that, say you keep the starters the same. You keep Derrick Jones as the 3 and Covington as the 4. Great. Well, now you got Zach coming back, so it kind of does the exact same effect. Now do you play Zach at the 4, Carmelo slides to the 3, and then you have the same problem with Hood and Trent again. So you're going to have a weird log jam of depth guys now, and I think to kind of talk about future things, and we won't get into trade deadline moves or anything like that yet until we start to hear some rumors, but you got to think that we're building up to make some kind of an additional move at some point later in the year. Mm-hmm. And I think that Zach will be in the forefront of that. I think he's still a stretch 4 potential. I think their teams are going to want a 7-foot guy that can hit a 3, that can hustle on defense, and they'll make a move for him because we can't fit him into our roster unless we do some of these weird lineups that we just talked about. Plus, Neil loves to play CJ or Dame without each other too. Like CJ will play with the bench units as a point guard role, or he'll line up consistently with a guy like Anthony in the past, or he'll come out with Gary Trent at the 3 in the past. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how they give these guys these minutes, and I'm curious to see what you think we do when Zach comes back from this injury.
Yeah. I think you nailed it with staggering. I think you're going to see Dame and CJ play point guard off of each other more. I think you're going to see a lot when CJ sits, Dame is in there. When Dame is sitting, CJ's in there. I don't trust Anthony. I'm sorry, that guy. No one's going to give him 20 minutes in a backup point guard role. We don't have the Shabazz Napier. We don't have the Seth Curry to bring that ball up who can threaten you with that shot. I think Anthony's got potential, but he's still a few years out and he still needs minutes. So I think it's staggering. And as much as I want to say I don't like it, here's what I think. Our shooting guards are longer and stronger than they've ever been, right? I know you love Gary Trent Jr. I know that we love Hood. I do agree with you that DJJ should not be playing shooting guard. He's probably too big.
He's got to come in at small forward.
Yeah.
Where he really plays, bench or
So
starting.
yeah, so I think you stagger those two, and then what you do is you always pair CJ with one of those bigger guys. So you're going to go CJ and Hood or CJ and Gary Trent, and the two of them are going to play. CJ's going to facilitate, and then you really need Gary Trent Jr. to hit his threes. You need Hood to hit his threes. If those guys can hit the open threes that CJ can create for them, the second units won't struggle. The other thing is, and I think you've talked about this before, you love Melo in the second unit. You think he's a mismatch. So CJ's your point guard, but you might have a lot of offense running through point forward in Melo. And Melo's going to be on the block. And I think we're going to use Melo in that second unit more. And Enes Kanter can go to the block too. Hey, dude, go get us 10 points in your 12
They're going to be
minutes.
our ISO scorers, 100%. They're going to be the ISO scorers. I mean, Carmelo can hit a 3. Don't get me wrong. He had a good percentage last year. He had a sneaky good percentage from 3.
Yep.
He's not going to look for it very often. He loves his mid range. He loves kind of doing those classic Melo foot jab and get those guys off position. But yeah, like you said, I mean, you're going to have a Hood and Trent hitting your threes, and you need to rely on them. It's just going to be an interesting concept because I feel like Zach or Anthony going into this year, they're not going to make it. Like you said, Anthony needs the minutes. He needs the experience. We've struggled to give it to him. He didn't play in the bubble. He wasn't part of the 9 guys that Stotts rotated in. He wasn't in, as far as I know, the playoff series very much against the Lakers outside of maybe some garbage time. So it's a matter of him or Zach. Somebody's losing out. We don't have the minutes to give these guys.
So, but here's the thing, and I think we could attest to this. I think Zach has gotten the minutes. We've seen him get the minutes at that position, and he hasn't done it. So what do you owe this guy minute-wise? I understand he's an asset, and I understand you want to show him off. You want to drive the cool car before you sell it, but the dude cannot produce, and he's gotten either broken down via health or he's struggled. And I'm just ready to see something else. I'd rather see Giles at the 4 playing minutes, 20 minutes a game, than Zach getting some empty garbage time just so you can trade him later.
It just seems to me like Zach was meant to be a center for us, whether it be a backup center to Nurk or whatever the case is. We tried to force him to be a power forward. We tried to go really big on the front court, and he just seems to struggle. He doesn't have the lateral movement. He doesn't have the mobility to take some of these smaller, Covington-sized players. And then when you line him up against guys like Anthony, he can't take a guy like Anthony Davis. He's getting in foul trouble. He's committing too many fouls. I love the hustle. I love that he's trying to get in there and block, and he's excited to get in there and play with a guy like Whiteside or Nurk, and they've played okay together before, but the athleticism is crushing to us. Our best lineup with him was when he was in the backup role when we had Chief starting at the 4, because his size helped out in the backup center role when we did our playoff run. And, again, we didn't have Nurk during that, but at the same time, I just don't see a role for Zach on this team consistently unless he plays the backup 4. And that's where I think he comes in and plays. I don't think he fits anymore with Covington and Derek Jones, and I think fans are going to see the athleticism that they give you, and you're not going to want to put a guy like Zach in there to start slowing down the offense again on the starting unit. So I don't know. It's tough. I mean, it's a matter of perspective and opinion and how much you like Zach on this team. But to me, he's the one guy to watch closely this year, because I think when he comes back, I think they're going to give him minutes. I'm not, and that's what we're discussing right now, is where he gets the minutes and who's affected by that. But I don't think he makes it past the trade deadline. That's an
yeah.
Opinion.
there's only one reason that you can't trade Zach, and he's the last sweet haircut guy on the team, dude. Like, you traded Hazonia, Nick Stauskas, let's see, Pat Connaughton. Like, we don't have a cool haircut guy anymore. And unless Nurk is going to cut his hair really cool and sexy, I just don't see how you can
The
trade Zach.
ginger fro that he has going right now, he's making a statement case. Have you seen the red fro? Like, it's
Don't get me started on the red fro. I already have like the red facial hair. If I grow out my hair, it'd look just like him, but 2 feet shorter.
Oof, is it just 2? Maybe. Yeah, a couple pounds lighter too.
Just a couple.
Just a couple.
So, okay, so we've gone through those lineups. We feel pretty good. What we've seen in the preseason is just a lot of new faces. I think that Stott's ability to get these guys ready and get them plugged in, and Dame and CJ too, right? They're the leaders on the team. They got to get the chemistry going. They got to figure out who's going to get the ball and what's going to happen. I think you're going to see a little bit more of a struggle at the start of the year. The Western Conference is just better. I mean, I don't understand how every year the Western Conference just gets better and better and better, but it did. Yeah, maybe because that team destroys itself and implodes upon itself. But I think the Suns got better. I think we agree the Mavs got better. I think everyone would say that the Clippers and the Lakers are still going to be a top 3 seed probably.
Denver's consistent.
Utah and Denver, like these big heavy hitters, they're just like us. They remind me of us. They're scrappy. So I think you're going to see, because we have some new faces and because the West is tougher, I think we're going to have a slower start than we have in years past. Would you agree?
I think I would agree. I think without the offseason with Dame, when he typically gets these guys together, they have a little bit more time to get used to each other. And that, like, attest to Dame's leadership, and he's able to get new faces integrated pretty quickly into our system. Because you look at the last few years with new guys, we've actually started off relatively strong, just because other teams make a lot of additions and their chemistry seems to be worse than ours, because I feel that our stars are more open to new guys, and they tend to do a good job of getting them into the groove. But we don't have that off season, right? We're having a month of training camp, and even so, with COVID regulations, it's tough to get these guys to have some of the outside of the facility bonding that you normally see.
Yeah,
I do think that our fit is better than you're giving them credit for, because I think that DJJ and Covington fit the chief MO role. As far as a system goes for us, I think they're going to be able to fit that role a little bit better. Stotts knows how to use these athletic wings. He's going to get them in open 3 positioning, and Dame and CJ aren't going to change, and Dame and Nurk still have that chemistry with the pick and roll that has been just super consistent. So I really think that it'll be a little bit smoother than we're giving them credit for. I think the hardest thing will just be getting them into their positions to hit their threes. And just really the defensive rotations at the start of the year are going to be tricky. Like, hey, you got to make sure you roll over here and guard this guy. Oh, this guy screened me. You need to get over here and get your arm up on him. So you're going to see some of that stutter, but they're also athletic enough and long enough, I think, to make up for a lot of that. I think you're going to see that work out a little bit better for us than even last year. So it could go both ways. I mean, like you said, the West is stacked. I mean, you got the Kings are no scrubs. The Pelicans, everybody's projecting to get in the top 8 this year and make the playoffs with Zion and Ingram and those guys. So I'm not as scared of the Pelicans personally. I don't think they have the guards to stop anybody now they let Holiday go, but they're definitely going to be a threat with their length with Zion and Ingram. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. You're not wrong. We're going to have a tough Western stretch to get through. 72 games. You don't even have as many of those. And on top of all that, the one thing we're not talking about is COVID. We're in a pandemic, and granted, we have a vaccine apparently coming out here soon, but you got to think that guys are going to miss games. You're going to have weird lineups, and people are going to get sick and have to be away from the facility, and it's going to be a weird year, which is only going to hurt the chemistry of some of these guys and getting time to play together. So you really got to hope that we come out and start strong. And I really feel like Neil got guys that fits the system that Stotts likes to run. And I think that will help a little bit with the transition.
Okay. So if you were to predict right now what our win total over under, like what would you kind of put it at for this year?
I think we're in low 40s. I really do. I think we're over 500. The consistency, having an MVP candidate yearly on your team is going to go far for us. Him and CJ play great together. Having a fully healthy Nurk to start the year, the chemistry with the guys that we do have and that are coming back, I think is going to be enough to carry us. And our bench, especially early in the season, I mean, even if our starters struggle to kind of get in the groove of positioning and how they want to be used and where they like to be, and Dame's got to learn all their movements, but you're going to have guys coming on the bench, all these veteran guys that are going to be able to just get all this ISO scoring. And I think our bench is going to be in my opinion, top 5 in the league.
Mhm.
And I think that's where we're gonna see the improvement. And that's where we're gonna start sticking to these games. Is you're gonna see these guys come in and continue to put up points and keep us in, the lead if we have it, or at least get us back into a game and not lose a lead or get too far behind when the game starts cooking. So that is the biggest thing for me that's going to be consistent. I think we start off, honestly, I could see us going anywhere from 13-7 to 14-6 to start the year, start off hot in the West, and then other teams will start to catch up to us and you'll start seeing that competitiveness. We have a tough stretch to start. Our first 2 weeks or so are pretty rough, but after that, the middle, right when you start hitting that 10-game mark, we have a pretty good stretch. Some of these Eastern teams like New York, and I think you'll have that time to get some of the wrinkles out of the way, and then you'll see a nice little run there just to get us in there in the teens. I think you'll see after the first 10 games, you start getting games 10 through 20 is when you're going to see us go to that 13-7 range.
Yeah. I think the COVID point's a pretty valid point. I don't know what to expect for this year. I mean, we watched the NFL and how they've done with no bubble, and it's a little spotty at times. I mean, the NBA schedule is even tighter than that. They play games every other day a lot of the time. So I don't know, man. I mean, I'm curious to see how the NBA handles that, how testing goes, and until they start, we won't know. Yeah, so it'll be really interesting. I think 45 wins. I mean, I think that's like totally achievable. This is by far the best defensive team. I don't even know the last time we had a team with this much athleticism. Honestly, the bounce is going to be insane. I hope we have cutters, and I hope we have ball movement and energy and things that we haven't seen in a few years, not since the West Batum era where there was a lot more cutting. I feel like that's something that we've been missing.
No, it really has, and it's one of the best points to bring up with the athleticism and the guys moving around. I mean, Mario was brought in to be the athletic cutter, the guy who can be a point forward. He's supposed to be.
We're already too far over on the Mario Hazonia mentions. We're like on our third one.
Is that 3?
Yeah. It's like a buzzer. When you mention Mario 3 times, we have to end the podcast
to stop it.
Yeah, that's to just stop it.
I feel like that was the same thing with Evan Turner, and it seems like
no.
But that's the thing, right? We've slowly evolved. It's like a Pokemon. It's like you start off with Evan Turner, then you evolve to Mario. Okay, that seems weird to say. And now you got Derek Jones, and now you have Covington. So they've tried to get guys like that to come in and play, and they just, you haven't had Batum and West since 2016, and now I feel like you have these guys that are going to be able to do that. The cutting is going to be interesting. I don't think we're going to see a lot of Covington cut to the rim. I mean, I'm sure he'll make his moves every once in a while, depending on situations, but he's going to go sit himself on the arch or the corner, and he's just going to wait, and he's going to hit the threes that we ask him to hit. Mm-hmm. I think Derek Jones is the guy you're going to see cut a little more. He's got the length and the athleticism to go up, Mr. Dunk champion himself. I think Dame's going to like that. Our offense is still going to roll through the pick and roll with Nurk, so it's going to be the fast break points that I think you're going to see an improvement on, and I can't wait. I really can't. I think you're going to see a lot of those movements where guys like Jones are going to be able to cut and get to the rim, and they can catch the ball in transition, which, was kind of an issue with Chief and Mo, was they would get in position and then drop the ball. And then if they can handle it, you're going to see a little bit more fast break points, in my opinion, which is going to be good. We're going to need to take advantage of those because we're pretty reliant on the fast break 3. We have been consistently. They like to get down there, stop, hit a guy for an open 3, and I think now you'll see a little bit more finishing at the rim, which will be great. It'll be fun to watch. Fans love that. They love the high flyers. So we should see a little bit more of that. Yeah, we haven't had those guys, and I think you're going to start seeing a little more cutting, a little more movement, because as much as I love me some Melo's not cutting to the rim anymore. Like, he's just not. So you're going to see the movement and the athleticism pretty early on, especially with these guys who are trying to make their mark.
Yep. I think so too. So we agree on early-ish 40s win total. We think we're probably around 4 or 5 seed this year.
I don't think it's out of the question. I still think, in my opinion, New Orleans is too young. We saw the inexperience come in the bubble. They had I don't know how healthy Zion was, but they still had guys like Holiday and Ingram, and they failed to do anything in the bubble. And they added guys like Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe they got back in the trade. So, I mean, sure, they're not going to be terrible, and they'll probably be more defensive than we think with Adams anchoring their defense, but I still don't see it. You're not going to have Porzingis for a while. He's still out. So the Mavs are going to rely heavily on Luka again, which is fine. But you don't just go from the 4th seed out of the playoffs completely where some rankings have us. And I just don't think, last year with the injuries and everything, it was a weird year. And when we got relatively healthy, or at least when Nurk came back, you saw what we did in the bubble. And that was a tough show. We couldn't go end the bubble playing as hard as we had to play and then immediately play the Lakers in the first round. We had all that rest. So that wasn't a good representation of us. And I think there's still some people looking at that Blazer team last year and trying to give us predictions. So I don't see the 4th and 5th seed. I think you're going to have the 2 LA teams. I definitely think Denver is going to be right there. I think that you're still going to see, my opinion is Golden State makes a bounce back.
You think they win more than 15 games this year, huh?
I think they're not going to be a lottery team. It depends on health, obviously, but even without Klay Thompson, Oubre and Wiggins are enough wing scoring for them to, and still the Seth Curry show. So when you got Steph Curry out there doing his thing, and you got these guys around him, and you still got Draymond, they're tough.
Yeah.
But again, their defensive depth, their bench depth is gone. They don't have Iguodala and Livingston and some of these guys that they've had in the past to help them out and stop guys in the playoff run and those big close games. So yeah, I think that you're going to be in that muddle of teams like Utah and the Jazz and Golden State and these back end teams. San Antonio is always good. Memphis was the 8th seed last year before the bubble. They were rolling. So I think 5-4. I think you're right there. It depends on what happens with Harden. I mean, Houston's going to be scary if Wall can stay healthy and Harden stays on that team. And, you got DeMarcus Cousins now. Like, who knows what they get out of him. So they're going to be in the talks for that. But outside of the 2 LA teams and really even Denver, who we seem to have Denver's number, sorry, but we do, then I am. That's a cat tail.
Clearly, the cat is a big Denver fan, big Nuggets fan.
That's the kind of defense that you fans can expect to see from coming from that right there. I had nowhere to go. Couldn't handle it.
Dude, you were overwhelmed. I could tell. You were flustered.
Yeah, that's that perimeter defense. So, yeah, I think the 5th seed is probably going to be it. I think you're going to have those 3 teams, and then I think you're in that muddle with it could go anywhere from Houston, us, Utah, Dallas. I mean, they're all going to be right there. OKC obviously falls back. They were a playoff team last year that you're not going to see going into the bubble. Memphis was the playoff team that I don't think makes it back. Phoenix is going to be fighting there with New Orleans, but again, youth. Even with Chris Paul anchoring down the point guard position and that veteran presence, they were not good in the regular season until the bubble. They just weren't. So, you got to argue that, they got Chris Paul, but I mean, did they get much else? Ayton is still Ayton. I mean, Booker is going to be in talks for MVP candidate if he stays healthy and continues to do what he did in the bubble, but I still think the experience that they're going to have compared to what Dame and CJ and Nurk and that chemistry is, we're going to be one of those top teams in the West. Yeah.
I just think the Suns, they just remind me of Minnesota. It's like a chemical issue in the organization that just says you cannot be a top 5 West seed. I mean, even in the years with Jimmy Butler and Cat and all these good players, Minnesota can't elevate themselves. And it doesn't matter what good players you get. If your team and your organization just like saps, it's going to sap the life out of Chris Paul. I think he's going to go nuts there. I think he's going to be yelling at Booker. I mean, I don't see the fit in these guys. I think OKC falls down. I think Houston is in danger of falling down. I don't see how Ball and Harden, I don't see how this is going to work.
Houston is banking on DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall being healthy. I mean, they're playing the 2016 like MVP candidate game here. They are trying to get these guys back into form. Just look at my fantasy team right now; it's full of these guys. Blake Griffin, by the way, and late 100. He's coming back.
No. Blake Griffin, get to cooking for Anthony.
Yeah, you watch my fantasy team. He was a steal in rounds 100 plus. But
I thought he was in danger of COVID because I thought he was in an old folks home.
Ooh, well, no, volunteering maybe. He's a great guy.
Now we're gonna trade Zach for Blake Griffin straight up halfway through the year and 18 bajillion in salary.
We'll definitely talk about trades, I'm sure, throughout the year. I mean, that'll be one of those fun things that we're gonna come up, especially with the weird short year.
What else as far as like we got all the additions down, we got everything going on. There's a lot of change.
The first episode here is one of the things I wanted to cover.
Yep. Anything else you want to hit hard before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think I'm excited to see how this the preseason goes here. I'm excited to kind of see how we start to see these guys getting the rust knocked off. I mean, a lot of the guys that played in the bubble, I'm sure will be fine because that was only a couple months ago. But you're going to see how Rodney Hood reacts and how he comes back getting that, how the new guys, like you said, how the rotations will work with them. But yeah, I figured we do this weekly. So next week we'll post again. We'll get to cover the preseason, talk about what we've seen, get some video in here, and take a look at some of these guys and start to go from there. And we'll start projecting the weeks on a weekly basis. I think it's going to be interesting. I don't have a lot of takes right now to cover. I kind of wanted to go over the offseason moves and talk about the roster and the depth and try to figure out where some of these guys are going to be, like the Giles and the Zach Collins. And I'm excited to see how they work. I think as we go through the year, there's going to be a lot of other things that come up. The breaking news with Gary Trent Jr. turning down the extension, I think is something we could touch on real quick before we go, because that's big, right? He's going to be a restricted free agent. Came out and said it. Doesn't want our extension. Yeah. Doesn't mean we can't bring him back, but you got to think he's going to get, like you mentioned when we talked earlier, is that Alan Crabb, $18-19 million for 3-4 years. And it's, can we afford it? And B, is it going to be worth the investment unless you ever get rid of CJ? So that'll be something to monitor. We could either end up screwing ourselves by giving him that kind of money, and he just never really does more than what he is right now. I mean, he's fine right now, and 3-and-D guys are a premium, but we have to see a jump from him this year. So that's one of the things I want, fans to watch for is how Gary Trent does, because that news is going to be really important to follow. If he has a killer year off the bench and he's hitting 10 to 15 points and shooting 40% plus from three again, and he starts to get a reputation as the bulldog, as we call him, and he starts getting that defense down, we are not going to be able to keep him. I just don't think we're going to be able to keep him. There's just no money for him, not at that price. And, we could end up being the Utah Jazz who let the next Wesley Matthews walk away to another team because we didn't match, or we could be the 2016 Portland Trailblazers and we just paid too much for an Alan Crabb. So it's tricky. So we really want to watch that. I think that's the biggest thing to keep an eye on, is what he does with those guys around him in that second unit. So that's kind of the last thing I think that we need to pay attention to. That was some big news that came out last week. And
well, I just saw a tweet the other day from some NBA guy, I can't remember who it was, but it said that we're no longer a luxury tax team. So we, for the first time since 2016, it feels like we've been a luxury tax team every year, and we haven't been the championship or bust team. So why be in the luxury? We've always felt like it's ridiculous to be that highly paid as a salary. And then you got Dame and CJ on these max deals. Dame's super max kicks in. I mean, monetarily,
that's $30 million a year.
Yeah, monetarily, when you're talking to me about Gary Trent Jr., he's not a starter. I love the guy. We drafted him. He looks great, but he and Rodney Hood are very similar. When the best version of Hood is very similar to Gary Trent Jr., I think he's competing for it. I think we're going to see at the end of the year, we do hold the restricted so we can match anything, but I don't think that we're tied to him. And if he gets some offer that's insane, like let's say some team just ponies up an Alan Crabb deal, I don't think we should sign it. I would rather have cap flexibility and the ability to sign someone than lock ourselves into guys that we draft. And I know that that's a Portland thing, right? Like we sign guys to second deals. We signed Myers Leonard to a second deal. We signed signed all these guys that don't feel like we should maybe sign them, and we keep them. We don't need to keep Zach Collins, and we don't need to be tied to Gary Trent Jr. if the price gets too expensive.
Right. I agree with you 100%. You got Hood now for 3 years, and if Hood comes back from injury, and it was the same dynamic we just spoke about, like when Zach comes back and what that does to the rosters and what happens with the Gary Trent and Hood dynamic, because you're playing, at this point, you're playing Carmelo. So I think if Carmelo doesn't come back next year, that opens up some room on the roster, but he's not costing us anything. So the monetary thing doesn't change.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of finding space for these guys. And I just think you're basically saying that Hood's coming back to 3 years. You committed to him. That means you're okay with Gary Trent potentially leaving in the offseason, but it's just something to watch about. I mean, we had that news break last week. So as far as just something to keep an eye on throughout the year is what Gary Trent does.
I think people will come calling for Zach Collins and Gary Trent as like last minute guys that they can pick up and hold the rights to. It wouldn't surprise me if you hear both those guys come up in a trade for a young team that wants assets. I think Gary Trent could be used as an asset. What Neil decides to do with him, like you said, is going to determine, is he the next Wesley Matthews from the Jazz, or is he the next overpaid Alan Crabb? And it pains me. Like, we loved Alan Crabb. We were the biggest Alan Crabb fans. but it's painful to sit here and say this guy makes 18 million a year to play 8 minutes.
Right? I was all on board with the Allen thing. I almost got a
AC,
T-shirt.
we love you.
Rest in peace, bud. I don't even know where you are. Yeah,
Brooklyn,
right? Like, so it's just important to watch. He's basically going to be in a season-long interview for other teams, and for us, whether or not we want to commit that money going back into the tax and trying to continue to be all in with the Dame CJ, which I think we are, but it's about being smart at this point. And Neil made some smart moves this offseason. Next offseason is going to be interesting because a lot of these guys like Cantor and Carmelo and Zach, they're going to start coming to that point where you're going to have to start making decisions of whether or not who you're going to bring back. And I think Trent is playing for that next contract, and it's going to be a matter of whether or not he's with us or not. So something to keep in mind. That's the thing I think I'll take away from the news last week and just to watch for in the season. That's my number one thing to keep an eye on. What about you?
I am a pretty big Derrick Jones Jr. fan. I think that his addition is going to be really welcomed by the Blazer fans. I think he's been a part of several teams. He's a young guy, but he's been a part of several teams. He's 23. I think his run with the Heat last year taught him a lot about his role and what he needs to do to stick in the league. I think he's got a lot of upside, but I think you're going to see
went to the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, he was part of that Miami team. Yeah. He's got championship experience.
And if they didn't have really good shooting guards, because they had Harrow and they had all these guards that could shoot. Duncan Robinson can just light it up. I think he would have got more run on that team if they didn't have ridiculously good wings like that they could shoot. So when you're talking to me about DJJ, I think he's going to be the thing that I'm most excited for. The other thing is just health. I want to see Nurk stay healthy. I want to see Rodney Hood play a full season. I know that these guys are coming off of long-term injuries, and we have no idea what they're going to contribute. We know what Nurk's going to do. We don't know what Hood's going to give us and when he's going to give it to us. So I want to see it. I think as a fan, I want us to play well against good teams. I think the thing that we struggled with last year, we got beat up by good teams. The top 3 seeds in the West had our number. I want to see Rocco go at AD, and I want to see us lock a good team down. And I know that you feel that way as well. I don't care if we beat the Kings by 20. I want to see us compete and win big games against good teams.
Yeah, if you're going to go, if we predict we're going to go over 500 and get into the lower 40s, then you're going to have to go at least 500 against, the top potential 4 seeds in the West. So, you're going to have to play the LAs and Utah and Houston and all those guys. You're going to have to split these series, or it's the best of your thing. You're going to have to play good. So that's a good point. And I think the defense is going to be key to watch for that.
Yep.
So
we're feeling good. We think it's probably, I feel like, honestly, it's probably the best roster we've had since 2015. The LaMarcus years was the last year we competed for a title at this level. I know we had a Western Conference Finals run, but I always never felt like we could 100% do it. I think this year we have the horses. It just depends on health and if we can honestly have some of these big teams fall down. We got to beat the Lakers, and that's a tough ask, right?
It is. They're the defending champs. They're going to be the team that we need to be able to play decent against in the regular season to prove that we can take playoff LeBron on. It's a whole different monster. People were talking terrible about them in the bubble, and their offense sucks. And then they came in and steamrolled everybody on their way to the championship. So, yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be key is going 500 or better against teams who are 500 or better. That's going to be the end of the day. You're going to play those top teams. Is really just seeing how we match up against them so that when we do get in the postseason, because I think we will, how well you can expect the team to do. So for sure.
Good. All right, man. Well, episode 1 down. Anything else you want to sign off with?
I think that's it, man. We'll just looking forward to seeing some of the preseason games, getting a vibe of some of these new guys, and I'm sure fans are too. We'll start talking about them. Next week we'll be able to recap some more of these games, really start to see what we're seeing and talk about them and finally get that in the loop and get ready for the regular season. It's coming 22nd.
Yep. Here we go. Rip City Real Talk. That's what we got for you, folks. 2 fans.
True fans, just normal guys, who aren't afraid to talk about players in any kind of way. We don't have anybody holding us back. So we're excited for you guys to continue to try to absorb any kind of knowledge that we can try to give you if you're just a casual fan, and definitely have debate and talk about it if you're a real fan like us. We definitely are open to you guys giving us questions, getting in some debate. We'll start getting our social media platform up and running soon. We'll try to get you guys involved. I'd like to start hearing some questions, things you want us to talk about. We'll get into that stuff as we start to get more episodes going here, and we appreciate it. We hope anybody that views this is excited and that we can share any kind of knowledge with them. Yep. Got my super tight Nurk jersey. That's snug nowadays.
Yeah.
I got this last time I had it. It was right before Nurk broke his leg, and since then, I think the depression hit me the hardest. So
COVID Nurk jersey on, baby.
Yeah, COVID Nurk jersey. That's
lockdown.
It's definitely a lockdown body trying to fit into this Nurk jersey. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm hoping you guys got something out of this. May not agree with everything that we talk about, and maybe you have more insight to provide to us based on things you know about. So we're looking forward to it as a weekly basis, hoping that you guys follow us and go from there.
Yeah, and we're big fans of Bad Shots, right, Paul George? So just keep following. I know you're going to be listening, and you just got your contract extension, so you can afford to listen. So you just keep on listening. We'll teach you some defense, okay, pal?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. Well, I'm gonna sign off. It's been quite the fun hour. We'll talk more this weekend or this next week.
Yeah, long episode to get ready. This maybe not be so long as we do the weekly recaps, but appreciate your time again. Craig Moshkow, Anthony Blaylock. This is Rip City Real Talk. Thanks, everyone.